All right, the title of this lecture is the cardiovascular system. And this is by no means the entire thing, but this is where we're getting started today. Let's examine this word for just a moment. It's broken into two sections. Cardio is a word that means what, gang? That's right, heart. If you're doing cardio exercises, you're doing exercises that increase your heart rate, or that's the goal. Then there is vascular. Vascular simply means vessels. So this is the system that deals with the heart and your blood vessels. Sometimes, aka circulatory system. Circulatory system. That is to say, this is the system that is responsible for moving the blood, okay? It circulates. So this is the physiological description, and this is the anatomical description. What's the goal of this system, folks? Why do we need it in 2 words? Not so much. Yes, that's true too. All we have to do, we got a heart and blood vessels. What are we trying to do? We're moving blood. There's a lot of reasons to move blood. There's a lot of things within blood, but essentially that's the goal, is we want to be able to move blood around. That's the whole reason we have this system. Now, we have, or humans have, a closed circulatory system. And what that means is this: all of our blood is contained in what? Veins and arteries, which are vessels. Now, if we were arthropods, something from the phylum Arthropoda, which includes lobsters and crabs and all insects and spiders with an exoskeleton and jointed legs, they have an open circulatory system, which means that they have a heart or multiple hearts that move blood, but there's no vessels that they're sending it through. They're basically, this inside of their body cavity is a pool of blood, and this is just more or less just making sure it moves around. It's not sending it specifically to any destination. Now, they can get away with that for a couple of reasons. One, they're mostly small, and 2, they're cold-blooded, so their metabolism is much, much less consuming than ours is, and so they're able to get away with it. But ours, for the most part, unless you got stabbed recently, should all be contained in vessels. Okay. All right. Vessels include primarily, and there's a few others we can add if we get really nitpicky, arteries. Okay. Arteries are defined. Arteries take blood. Yes. Away from the heart. So anything taking blood away from the heart is an artery. For the most part, arteries carry oxygenated blood, but there are some very specific exceptions to that, which we'll talk about later. But this rule is always true. Arteries are taking blood away from the heart, whereas veins take blood back to the heart.
I didn't realize you did that on purpose until after I reread it about 10 times.
Yes.
I was like, why did you put that typo there?
Yep. Away, V back to. Okay. That way you remember it. All right. Then there are capillaries. Capillaries are a little different. Okay. These are pretty big. What we're going to name in the body, as far as vessels, are things that are big enough to be seen, like these guys. Okay. These are not really big enough to be seen. They're microscopic. In fact, we'll open with that. Microscopic vessels with thin walls that allow nutrients, gases, and wastes to pass through. I'm putting that there because without these are useless. Without capillaries, arteries and veins have no purpose. The goal is to get blood to the cells. The walls of these things are too thick to allow for the nutrients and oxygen and so on and so forth to get to the cells. So we need these type of vessels to allow them to get there. So here's the structure basically. Here's your heart, and no heart ever looks like this. So what type of vessel is this?
Artery.
Okay, and then we're going to fan this out a bunch. Okay, and then we're going to bring it back together again. These are small. It's like a whole bunch of branched out, branched out, branched out, branched out. These are what? Capillaries. And then finally coming back to the heart. That's pretty big. That's the system. Now depending on where they're located, sometimes this is a short trip, sometimes it takes a little more time. On average, this trip takes a minute. From the time blood leaves your heart to the time it gets to the capillary to the time that it returns to the heart again, that red blood cell will have found its way all the way to where it needs to go and all the way back in less than a minute. And in the middle of strenuous exercise, 30 seconds. Okay? Heart rate increases, those blood cells are getting back to the heart a lot faster. On average, this trip takes about a minute. Even if it's going from my heart to the end of my finger and then coming back. About a minute. Doesn't take that long, and it shouldn't. Okay.
Where are capillaries like located at normally?
They are everywhere. That's the thing. Everywhere that you have cells in your body, and you have 125 trillion cells in your body on average, okay? Everywhere that you have cells, you have capillaries within 1 or 2 cell widths of those. Otherwise, your cells can't live. So, easiest ones to find are right here. There's a capillary bed in your finger. Try this with me. Squish your finger like that. You're squishing all the blood out. Now let go. It's like whitish yellow for just a second, and then it turns red again. What you've done is squished all the blood out of those little capillaries there in that capillary bed of your finger and filled it back in. That's actually something they use to assess somebody's circulation in their body, how quickly. It's called capillary refill action. But it's not just here in your fingertips, it's everywhere in your body. It's within all of your muscles. It is within your skin. It is within your liver. It is within all of the tissues of your body. They're infused with capillaries to make sure that all the cells of you get all the nutrients and things that they need.
So there's not just like one on the way on the arteries, it's like all along
Yeah,
the arteries.
yeah. In fact, let's put this in parentheses. Everywhere in body. Just like there's not just one artery that leaves. There is one main artery that leaves your heart, but it branches into thousands. Now, for scale, so you understand the quantity that we're talking about here. Did you guys find how many there are in the body?
How many what?
How many miles of blood vessels?
60,000.
Yeah, there are 60,000 miles of blood vessels in the body. And that's an average. You know, bigger people are going to have more, smaller people are going to have less. Just like bigger people are going to have more blood, smaller people are going to have less blood. Okay? Spanning the globe, ladies and gents, if we wrapped all the blood vessels around the Earth at the equator, it would wrap more than 2 times. The blood vessels inside of one person would wrap around the Earth more than 2 times. Okay. Just got a couple more things to go over here, and then I'll let you guys look at my blood. Okay. So, question. What is blood? Baby, don't hurt me. Blood is a suspension of blank and blank. What's the first blank? Plasma. And the second blank? Somebody's going to say it. Cells. Sometimes these cells are called formed elements. If you see that, it's the same thing. Plasma and cells. A suspension means it has to stay moving to stay mixed. We've known this actually for a very long time. I can take you back to an example 2,000 years ago. When the Roman Empire was huge, and they were experts at torturing and killing people. They would verify if somebody was dead, for example, from the mechanism of crucifixion. How would they figure out if somebody was dead? Can you think of the example I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. What did they do to find out if he was dead? They stuck a spear in his side. What came out? Water and blood is how it was described. Because to the best of their knowledge, that's what it was the water had separated from the blood. They knew blood was blood because blood was what color? Red. Because this is the portion of your blood that's red from the red blood cells. This is clear, kind of a clearish yellow. So once the heart stops moving or stops pumping, those two things separate out. So when they stabbed him and they ran out separately, they knew he was dead. All right. So going back here then, let's take a look at each of those. Okay, plasma. Plasma is the liquid portion of blood. It's a liquid portion of blood. Okay, and it makes up, and I hate that this number is so terrible, but it is, makes up 46 to 63% of blood volume. I like hard statistics. They're easier to remember. This one's not. Why the variance, gang? Anyone? Here's why. This number is different in you now than when you woke up today. And it'll be different when you go to bed, different when you exercise, because, you know, it has to do with your hydration level. You know, and there's other factors involved. It also has to do with your hematocrit, or how many red blood cells you have. But this will change as you start sweating throughout the day, because your sweat, it's not that your sweat glands have all this extra water stuck in them. Your sweat glands draw that moisture directly from your bloodstream. Okay, so this number is changing. So obviously then, of these, the greatest ingredient would be what? The most prominent is what? Water. And water makes up roughly 92% of your plasma. Which is what warms you and what cools you. Okay? Is that the water in there being able to move through your body. Besides water, what else do we have in here? This makes up 7%, which is a huge quantity if you think about how many this actually means. Got it?
I have an idea. Dissolved protein?
Yes, the plasma proteins. Plasma proteins make up 7% of this. And that leaves 1% for other solutes. I'm going to put a smiley face next to other solutes because this includes all of your nutrients that keep you alive. Nutrients, metabolic wastes. Okay, so that 1% is actually huge, which gives you an idea. Man, there's a lot of proteins in there. And if you've ever bled, you know that your blood is both metallic smelling and it's sticky. This is why it's sticky. Your proteins make it sticky. I don't know, I had a poison ivy every now and again, or like if you have a scrape or scab that's like healing, first blood comes out and then it starts to scab over and then it's just kind of that clearish liquid. Because when your blood clots, basically it forms like this web type mesh that traps the red blood cells first, and then is able to finally squeeze in those extra spaces. But these things can seep out through, and they're kind of sticky. All right, plasma. All right, so then we have cells. Cells make up the solid portion. And this is the last thing we're going to write down of blood. There were 3 kinds. You remember what they were?
Red,
Uh-huh. Yep. Red blood cells. White blood cells. And platelets. Just like our flag. Red, white, and platelets. These are not blue. I don't want you to think these are blue. All right. Red blood cells. What are the functions of each of these things? Let's start here. What's the red blood cell's job?
Carry oxygen.
Yep, that's it. It's really its only job. It's a drone. It does a little bit of carbon dioxide carrying too, but this is it. Its job is to carry oxygen. It doesn't even get a nucleus. It's just sent out with a job. No real instructions on the inside. It just does a good job of that. It's not really thinking very hard, just doing a job. Okay? White blood cells, these guys do get a nucleus. They need one. Yes, they do. They fight disease. And here's how they fight it. Om nom nom. That's how they fight it. They eat the bad guys. And platelets are responsible for? Yep. Well, let's put some numbers on the board, and then we'll call it a day for this lecture. Okay. What percent is this?
99.9.
Yes, 99.9% of all of your blood cells are red. So these together, and I'm not going to split hairs there, know that together they make up 0.1%. But know that's of the 37 to 54% of your whole blood. Saying of the cells, this makes up 99% of the cells. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a good start, and we'll call it a day there.